Okay, good morning. My name's Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery in Santa Ana. It's a Saturday morning, and today's class here we're getting toward late summer now, is planting your fruit orchard. So this time of year, in the past, we have quite a few things available in containers. Now, we are missing a few things that of the deciduous fruit trees we have during bare root season, but pretty much we have most of the important ones. And then the tropicals are all now looking really nice too. So we're lucky in this area of the world in that we can grow almost any fruit tree you can think of. In fact, a lot of our customers who are very experimental are growing more and more things that aren't supposed to grow here. I mean, if you go back 40 years ago, the book said you can't grow mangoes here. And they said you can't grow star fruit, you can't grow, there are a lot of things we couldn't grow in those days. We can grow them. So the weather pattern is changing too, but it's changed a lot over this last century. So we know the history of South County, because that's where we've spent most of our time in South County. And in the 19 teens, it was very cold in this area. There was, where we were in Lake Forest, there was an apricot orchard, vineyards. They said the apricots were so successful there that they were sending dried fruit to the soldiers in World War I. But in the 1920s, it got really warm. The winters got really warm, and all the apricots failed. So they pulled them out, planted orange trees, and we moved there in the 60s. The orange trees were there. So, supposedly in the United States, the warmest temperatures ever recorded were in the 1930s and 40s. Okay. For all the thermometers that were around back then, which weren't many, that's the problem. They didn't have that many thermometers across the U.S., but they said the ones that were there, that's the hottest temperatures ever recorded, 1930s, Dust Bowl era, all that. And then in the 50s got cool, 60s were cool, 70s were warmer, 80s were really cold. The coldest temperatures ever recorded in California, 1990, December 1990. Here we hit 23 degrees. So that's the coldest ever recorded. And then we got progressively warmer until about 2016. And now we're getting a little cooler again, although what's puzzling us is even though we're getting cooler, the years are getting cooler. Summers, I don't know what happened to our summers. We don't get 100 degrees in the last 3 years. But the winters have become very mild, which is puzzling. No frost since maybe 5 years ago at all. So puzzling. We'll see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen. No one can predict it. But we've seen, this cycle has gone on quite a bit in the last 100 years. So nothing new, unless you want to make it an issue. So we're cool enough to grow a lot of these deciduous fruit trees. Now, most of the deciduous fruit trees, well, only the stone fruit. So we're talking about apricots, cherries, peaches, nectarines, plums, pluots. Those trees do require a colder winter to get fruit. If they don't have the cold they need, the flowers don't develop properly, get very few flowers, and virtually no crop. So if the winter's warm, like 2014, 15, 16, just forget it. Write it off. There's not going to be much of a crop that year. We have to choose the ones that don't need much cold. Now, if you go to any of their nursery, they'll choose the ones that'll sell. We try to choose the ones that will perform here properly. Now, there's another problem we have in that a lot of the trees, like peach trees and nectarines that don't need much cold, also ripen really early. So they wake up early because they don't need much cold to wake up. But they also ripen early, which we're talking April, May, June. Most peaches that ripen April, May, or June aren't at the best tasting because we're usually cool, cloudy, and we got the overcast weather. So we have to choose the right ones that don't need much cold but ripen later, which is not that long a list, because we'd rather have the peaches ripen in summer than in our we have cool springs here. So, and on the tropical side, we have a lot of trouble because a lot of tropicals need that heat to wake up. Like guavas, the fruit on this tree should be about this size already, but we're not having. So back in the 80s and 90s, when I was doing a lot of fruit tree growing in my house, the typical year would be warming up March, April. April, we'd hit like 80, 90 degrees, and then that would bring the gloomy weather in after that. So we get that initial heat that woke up the guavas, got them to bloom and start fruiting, and then the June gloom would come in and keep everything a little mild, too mild, and then they would ripen, say, late summer, early fall, and that fruit would be pretty good. But last year and the year before, there was no heat at all in the spring. This year was a little nicer heat in the spring, but last 2 years, no heat in the spring. The guavas didn't start making their fruit until July. And when they don't make in July, it doesn't ripen until November or December. And if it's already cold by then, the fruit doesn't taste that good. Now, fortunately, the last few years, it's been decently warm in November and December. That's helped them out. But back in the 80s, November, December, we'd already be in the 40s at night and sometimes in the 30s. So anyway, we have to, we can't do anything about the weather, so we just have to live with it. Okay, and also in Orange County, a lot of it depends where you live. So a lot of the stone fruits that require the chill. Now, I have apples and pears in here too. And even though apples want cold weather, they're from Eastern Europe and Asia. They're used to having a real cold winter. They will still fruit without it, which is interesting. Pears can also, but we're having trouble with the pears. So I'll explain that when we get to those. The thing about apples is most apples ripen in late fall, early winter. So even though what happens here, so if you're in Oregon, the apples get their chill, they wake up right at the first sign of warm weather. So around April, most of the apples start blooming in Oregon. And Northern California, Washington, where they grow a lot in the United States. Here, they're still waiting for winter. But when it hits 80 degrees around May, they just wake up. They said, okay, we didn't get the winter, but we'll wake up anyway. They bloom. They're waking up late, but most apples don't ripen until November, so they've got a whole long time to develop, and they're fine. They may develop a month late, but we're still fine because we don't get any snow or frost here. So they do it. Whereas the pears, they're puzzling us because if we don't have the heat in spring, they don't even bloom. They wake up, but they don't bloom at all. So they're following a little different thing. They like the year we had the best crop in the last few years was, I think it was 4 years ago now. We hit 80 degrees in February and 100 degrees in April. And they bloomed in April. They were going, okay, it's nice and warm, we're blooming. There wasn't much winter that year, but it was hot early, and they bloomed and had a good crop. And then the year after that, no heat in April, and the year after that, no heat in April. They didn't bloom. And then this year, we had a little bit of warmth in April, and we have a few fruit on our pear trees. And the problem with pears is that if they don't bloom on time, around April or May, pears ripen in summer. So they don't have the time. I remember when I was a kid, my dad had a Bartlett pear in Lake Forest. It would fruit every year, but by the time the fruit fell off, it had grown this big because it bloomed around May or June and it only had a month or two to develop a fruit. So pears have not been as reliable as apples. Apples are now probably our most reliable fruit tree. So most apples will bear fruit by their second year you have them, and the quality is quite good. So now our most reliable fruit tree in the past, and it's still reliable, are the fig trees. I didn't even bring a fig tree in here. There it is. Now, just so you know, all the plants on this side are deciduous, so in the wintertime they lose their leaves, or we expect them to. The plants on this side are more evergreen, and they'll only drop their leaves if we get a nasty frost. So figs, which love our Mediterranean climate, were easily our most reliable fruit tree because they can grow without man's help. They'd start coming up in an empty lot and just make fruit. Now we've got a darn fruit fly from the Mediterranean area, which is causing a lot of problems. So the fruit fly, and fruit flies are small, they're like that big, so it's hard to stop them, are laying eggs in the eyes, the little eye hole of the fig, and getting in there before the fruit's even half developed and dropping a lot of fruit. In fact, a lot of our customers who've been collecting fig trees, because we can grow figs from anywhere in the world, were pulling their trees out because they said they're getting too heavy a loss on their fruit, dropping pretty much every single one. Now, we haven't gone that far. We haven't pulled them out, and we're still selling them. Last year was nasty because it was both a cool year, so we didn't get many figs to develop during the summer, and the fig flies are getting most of them. This year, warmer weather in the summer, although we're still below normal. It's warmer this year, and we're getting a lot of figs to ripen without the fig flies. So we're a little more optimistic now that it's not going to be as nasty a problem as some people have claimed it in this area. So generally, if they get the fig flies, the fruit falls off before it's ripe, so you don't have to worry about it. But just in case, don't just take a fig out and eat it. Break it open, make sure there's no maggots in there. So we're picking some fruit. These are fruits I picked yesterday off some of our trees. In fact, one of our employees brought in a fig yesterday off of a tree in her parents' yard that was that big around. Really big fig. So we have that new bug where the University of California is working on a treatment for it that we hope will be organic. We think we know which one they'll choose, which is a mixture of organic products, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so that's figs. Now with stone fruit, they do need the chill, and there are, in your garden, there's going to be microclimates. So it depends on your neighborhood also. So in Orange County, there are hills, and then there are riverbeds. Cold air does form. The air is colder at altitude, but cold air always drops to the lowest area overnight in the winter. So the places in Orange County that get the most chill are either canyons, the bottom of a canyon, or the major riverbeds. So the people who have the most success with the stone fruit trees usually live along the Santa Ana River. Santa River goes through Anaheim, goes through that area. It's draining the cold air from all the hills in this area. Probably some cold air coming in from Riverside down that canyon. and down the river, the low spots in the river. So I have a friend who lives 1 block off the Santa Ana River, and I can't believe what he can grow in his yard. A lot of different walnuts, just about any stone fruit. He gets the chill for it right along that riverbed. So most of our customers who get good stone fruit live in flat areas of Orange County near the major rivers. You'll also do fine in the canyons, Trabuco Canyon, Peters Canyon, Trabuco River, or Trabuco Creek, San Juan Creek. That area gets really cold. Back in 1990, when we hit 23 degrees throughout Orange County, a friend's house near San Juan Creek hit 17 degrees. Thank you. So, okay, so if you live at the top of a hill, a lot of the tropicals will love you. You know, they'll do really well. Citrus, the bananas, papayas, a lot of these tropical things will do well on the hilltops, especially if you're on the south-facing side of the hill. But even on the top of the hill, you know, there are some low chill peaches and nectarines that can still do well, but not all the stone fruit are going to be happy. There are some deciduous plants that don't require chill. So figs, we know, don't require chill. One of our customers lives in the Philippines for part of the year. He says he took some figs from us to the Philippines and they'll fruit year round. They don't need the winter at all. They'd rather be in a warmer climate. The winter shuts them down. He said the problem in the Philippines, if they have a real bad monsoonal year, all the leaves just rot and the plant dies. They don't like rain. You get rain on figs, they get this rusty spotting on the leaves that can cause all the leaves to fall off. And if you have 4 months or 5 months of monsoonal weather, that's it. Your fig tree's kind of history at that point. But they don't like it wet. And we found that persimmons do not need the winter. They probably need something to make the leaves fall off, you know, just enough winter to make the leaves fall off. But we found that on the years with the worst winters we've ever seen, like 2014, 15, they just wake up earlier. They're not waiting for a chill. They're just waiting for warm weather to get going. Same with jujubes. So 2 years ago, the jujubes didn't wake up until May because it was so cool in the spring, they didn't wake up. But they still produced. On hotter winters, they wake up in January and start flowering in January. So they don't need the winter at all. They just want it warm or hot. They're from a climate that's more like Fresno or even like Las Vegas. And then they'll fruit. And pomegranates don't seem to need the chill either. They just start growing when it gets warm enough. Usually that's by late February they start growing. And mulberries. Let's have a big mulberry back here. Had some fruit on it. This is our mother plant that we take cuttings off to make new trees.
What's the mulberry?
Blackberry. A little bit, well, between a blackberry and a raspberry. Yes, yeah, mulberries can go into almost any climate in the U.S. So they just grow when it's warm and they stop growing and drop their leaves when it gets cool. It doesn't take much coolness to make them drop, and it doesn't take much heat to make them grow right back. So, okay, some of the things you can put in an orchard would be, you know, we're talking about the permanent, fairly permanent plants. So here's blackberry. And certainly grapes can go on the walls. This is passion fruit. Passion fruit looks like that. It's one of the fruits that usually wild animals don't touch because it's got kind of an egg-like shell on it, and you cut it open, and then it's got what tastes like fruit punch concentrate in the middle. Now, another one of the more popular fruits lately has been dragon fruit, which is a cactus. So cactus is nice in that if you go on vacation and don't water it, nothing's going to happen. This cactus is from the tropics, Central America. It produces best when you water it. So keep it wet. It doesn't take much water to keep it wet, but keep the soil looking wet. They can grow 10 foot a year, and they produce fruit that like this. And the nice thing about dragon fruit, it can fruit. This is like the first crop of this year, and then there's usually 3 crops during the year, and occasionally we'll have 4 or 5 crops. If it heats up early, like 4 years ago, 5 crops that year. Not quite ever bearing.
Do you have to pollinate those with a thrush? Somebody was telling me the reason my neighbor didn't have any because she needs to go out and pollinate them with a brush.
Okay, question was, do you have to pollinate it? It depends. If you got lots of bees, you don't have to. So the thing about dragon fruit is they've got these foot-wide white flowers that open up around 4 in the afternoon and close around 10 or 11 in the next morning. If you go down in the morning and the flower's full of bees, you don't have to do anything. Especially if you have more than one dragon fruit in your yard. So it's nice to have more than one kind in case one doesn't like its own pollen. There's supposed to be a few of those around, although we really haven't seen ones that are totally that way. But just to play it safe, have more than one kind of dragon fruit in the yard. And if you see bees in the flowers, like we used to have leased land from a farm in Irvine that had beehives, and we'd go out in the morning. I'd be out there in the morning looking at the dragon fruit flowers, and there'd be like a dozen bees in every flower. We go, okay, you don't have to hand pollinate that. And with the bees in there doing that, 2 out of 3 flowers made a fruit. But if there's no bees, you have to be the bee, and you have to get your hand in the flowers in the morning and in the evening, the pollen's not mature yet. So in the morning, the pollen's mature, and you got to get your hands in there and get the pollen from the anthers onto the stigma in the middle to pollinate it. Now, a lot of dragon fruits, well, the white one, the original white one, they said is very self-fertile and self-pollinating. When the flower closes, the pollen goes right to the center and pollinates the flower. But on some of the other ones that are hybridized and things like that, you'll have to help the pollen reach the center with your hands, or if there's bees on it, they can do it. Yes.
Every day in the afternoon, it opens up in the afternoon, or does it only open up at one time?
Yeah, flowers only open one day.
How do you catch that?
Well, if you live at home and they're at your house, hopefully you're at home. So
I have 2 questions. So I just started growing this dragon fruit, and I saw the flower once, and then the flower after a few days just fell off. So then I won't get any more fruit.
You won't get any fruit off of that one because, yeah, if it gets pollinated, it should hang in there. But if if it did not get pollinated, and there are some flowers on dragon fruit that form that are so small, you go, okay, the ovary is so small on it that you go, okay, that's not going to make a fruit anyway. It's not strong enough to.
Okay, so if it's not pollinated, it'll fall off.
Right.
The second question I have is, do you have to prune those mulberry trees every year because they grow?
More than that. Several times a year.
Several times a year.
So on most of these trees, there are smaller growing versions. Like this is actually one of the smaller mulberries. It's probably not going to get much taller than it is right now. But we sell Pakistan red mulberries, which their goal is to be 40 foot high and wide. So when I had Pakistan in my yard in the ground, I took my chainsaw to it twice a year. Every time I cut it, I was cutting off about 12 to 15 foot of branch. But whenever you cut it, it forces it to releaf. In order to releaf, it reblooms and makes another crop. So every time I trimmed it, it would bloom and fruit again. So I had that thing on some of the shorter branches. I just kept cutting them back, and then they'd make another crop. I'd get a crop on the same branch 3 times in 1 year. So they're interesting that way. A friend of mine has a Pakistan. He keeps it 8 foot. He says he trims it every month, but it's a constant fruiting on his tree. It's always fruiting because he's always cutting it. So it just depends how much fruit you want to get on that. But its goal is to be 40 foot, but you can keep it under 10 if you're out there with your pruners. Now, a lot of these trees, most fruit trees, I would say their goal is to become 15 to 20 foot high and wide. But generally, we don't want that in a homeowner's yard anymore. I mean, there's a few fruit trees we don't mind getting big, and those are primarily citrus. Avocados can do it too. But it's the trees that the fruit don't ripen all at once. Like if you have an apricot tree, if you let it grow, like one of the first apricots I ever grew, I let it grow 15 foot high. Well, it's around 18 foot high and 15 foot wide. It's more like 20 foot wide. And when it had a crop, it was like 400 fruit. And you had about 3 weeks to pick it. You don't need that much fruit at one time. An orange tree at the same size, 400, 500 fruit, you've got 5 or 6 months to pick it. So a small family can consume the entire crop off of any citrus tree because it hangs there long enough. Apples have a long hang time in general. So there are some plants with long hang times. Avocados have long hang times. But most fruit trees, we don't want them to get that big because you can't use the fruit. So the stone fruit trees, most of the stone fruit trees, peaches, nectarines, have only a few months to ripe, a few weeks before they're off the tree. So you just don't want that in your garden. I was reading an interesting article. The almond growers, they've been chastised in the past for so much water to take to make an almond compared to, say, a peach tree. But they said that there's more nutrition in an almond, and generally you eat every one we grow. Whereas in a peach, about half of them are thrown away because they spoil along the way. So he says almonds are the most water efficient crop in the Central Valley. That's what he claims, because every one they sell, someone will eat. But peaches maybe a third of what they grow gets consumed. So interesting point. They're trying, everybody's trying to be on the good side of things. So grapes have long hang times too. So, and we have a grape out here. We're still picking it. Started picking it in July. Here we are. They'll hang on till through September if nothing else eats them. If our customers don't eat them, we don't eat them, they'll hang on.
Which variety?
That one happens to be Suffolk Red. This one here is Suffolk Red.
Do we grow cotton candy grapes? No.
Well, if you eat the Suffolk Red, it tastes just like cotton candy. So the main problem we have in this area is that the nurseries that don't know any better will sell you the wrong varieties of everything, and grapes included. So the grapes that most stores sell, Tom Seedless, Red Flame Seedless, don't do very well here. They're very prone to mildew. They like climates in California like Bakersfield, where it's 80 degrees at night and dry air. That's their climate. Thompson Seedless, the proper name throughout the world is Sultana too. It's from Persia. and it is the ancestor to most modern seedless grapes. So you have to be careful what grapes you pick. Suffolk Red is an American Russian hybrid. It does not need the heat. More or less likely to get mildew than any, quote, pure European grape. Most grapes we sell are hybrids. They're hybrids between different grapes. Most are European hybrids, but hybrids with American grapes to make it so they don't need that dry heat. So you have to get the right ones. We sell about a dozen varieties of grapes, but we don't sell Thompson seedless or Flame seedless because the chance of getting fruit on those here are pretty low. Apples, you can grow any apple you want. It'll fruit, which is really weird. The only apple we haven't gotten decent size on is Honeycrisp, unfortunately. I grew Honeycrisp for 10 years. Biggest fruit off my Honeycrisp was maybe that big. It looked like a miniature Honeycrisp, tasted just fine, but we couldn't get the size on because it ripens early, right in the middle of summer. So it wakes up late and ripens early.
Do your grapes that you sell lose all their leaves, and do you trim them back every year?
Yeah, grapes don't go totally dormant. In the last 10 years, they have not gone totally dormant. They lose most of their leaves, but they don't tend to lose all of them because we're not cold enough at the moment. Back in the 80s and 90s, everything would go dormant very well, but since then we haven't gotten quite cold enough to make them drop entirely. So they'll continue growing all the way into winter. And sometimes here we've seen grapes do a second crop. You know, if you trim a grape back heavily right after the first crop is ripe, which is usually July, there's enough time to get a second crop in. And we had some of those winters, 2014 and 15, when there was no winter. Our grapes were waking up in November and December and making their first crop by April. We took the crop off and they made a second crop in the summertime. So the weather can do some weird things. Yes.
Can a grape tree be moved? I have one that I want to move it. Can it be moved safely? Can I dig it out and then put it somewhere else?
You can. It may not be worth the effort. So with a lot of plants like grapes and like figs, you can take a piece of stem this long in the winter that had, take a piece of stem that had leaves on it this year and just stick it in the ground. It'll grow. That's how vineyards are propagated. They just take clippings of the grapes, stick them in the ground, and most of them grow. Not every single one.
You don't try to move it or anything, you just stick it.
They're real easy to propagate.
Doesn't need a graft.
They were grafting grapes for a while because of these grape diseases in the ground that happen when you've grown grapes for 30 years in the same spot. They get these diseases. So they started grafting them, and then the wine people complained, we can tell which grapes were grafted. The wine's not the same. So the snobby wine guys said that you can tell the difference between a grafted grape and a non-grafted grape on its own roots. So they don't do much grafting more. Plus, the University of California says they haven't determined that there's any real benefit to grafting grapes. So.
Is there a certain lifespan to a Japanese Asian pear tree? I have one that's about 25 years old in my yard. And, the last few crops, the fruits are getting smaller and smaller. I mean,
fruit size on plants is due to usually two factors. I mean, age can be a part of it, but generally if the tree looks healthy, the two main factors are number of fruit. The more fruit on the tree, the smaller they are, and the amount of water you give them. Now this year we didn't have any rain. So that's, the rain is probably half our water supply for the fruit tree. So if you didn't compensate for that and water a lot more this year, the fruit's going to be on the small side.
when is the best time to water for fruits?
All day. So the research from orchards, we get research from all around the world. The research last year said, if you go back 50 years, most orchards flooded their fields once a week because that's the technology we had 50 years ago. Then everybody switched to drip, said, we'll water either daily or every 2 days with the drip system. In fact, back in the 40 years ago, UC Davis did a study because they wanted to see if watering daily messed up the trees at all. So they did half an orchard every day, the other half with the same system once a week. And they dug up the trees at the end of the year to see how big the roots were. And the roots were the biggest on the trees that were watered every day versus once a week. So what they told us about deep and frequent watering make roots reach for the water was totally wrong. It didn't happen. So watering daily, in fact, last year, the orchard says, okay, what if we water 3 times a day? So they started doing that and said, boy, the trees are performing even better and looking better on the same amount of water. So they just put smaller amounts of water on 3 times a day. And it looks really, the trees just look so good. I've done that in my own yard. So 20 years ago, I had set it up, and a friend of mine said, yeah, this is the best way to water is 3 times a day. So I set it up that way. The only problem with 3 times a day watering, you get a lot more weeds. But boy, the plants look, it looks like you're in a jungle somewhere with all this growth coming around. The plants love it because most of the plants we grow are from wetter climates. So they like that constant moisture. Even though you're not watering more, you're keeping everything evenly moist. And that seems to be the key going now, is evenly moist. And I'm not even sure that California native plants like to get dry. But, so if they're healthy. Now, one of the key things we should mention is that how plants perform is due a lot to the quality of the plant you buy. So we make sure at our nursery that the plants are about as healthy as you can get. Because everybody, like we have complaints from a lot of customers, they've tried growing persimmons many times and they keep dying in their yard. By this time of year, the leaves are turning yellow and red, and the plants just never do anything for them. So we found out, so back in the 1980s, our persimmon leaves used to turn yellow and red because we used the soil that we were told to use, which was a compost, which is ground up sawdust based soil. And in the 90s, we go, okay, why are we having so much trouble with our plants in general? They're rotting out, things like that. We tell people, okay, try this, try not to water too often, and we couldn't figure it out. But in the 1990s, we figured out, okay, it's the compost and soil that's hurting these plants. Planter mixes and potting soils in general are compost based. They're mostly compost, which is totally an artificial environment for a plant. I mean, there's no tree in nature that when it dies, it grinds itself up and plants start growing in it. Trees sit there dead for sometimes a century, slowly decomposing, but they never break down into pieces. We don't know why our industry thinks that growing plants in compost is anything but horrible for the plant. I mean, that's telling you, make your house out of ground up dead animals and live in it because it's very nutritious. It's like, you can't do it. So once we took the compost out of our soil, the plants just don't turn funny colors anymore. They grow way faster than they used to. I mean, back in the 80s, we were happy if the persimmons grew a foot that year and held on to their leaves. That's how bad it was. And nowadays, we're not happy unless they grow 3 or 4 feet and have a crop.
So in Lake Forest, my soil is so clean. If you watered every day, do you think I would be able to get decent drainage?
You don't need drainage.
You don't.
So,
What about citrus?
no, citrus don't need drainage. So my friend of mine has an orchard 2 miles this way. One of the worst clays I've ever seen. Winter when it's raining, it's just slime there. And if you try to walk through the orchard, you pick up this much mud on the bottom of your shoes. It's that bad, but citrus don't care. So the problem we have is not that clay is bad. It's just that clay mixed with compost is a killer. So roots need to breathe oxygen. Clay breathes real slowly compared to sand. Sand breathes a lot easier because it's bigger pieces or bigger air spaces. So roots don't usually suffocate and rot because they can breathe. It's not the fact that the water is draining faster, it's the fact that they can get air in there. Clay can still get air in it, but if you load it up with compost, or if the plant you buy has got compost in it, then the compost is stealing the oxygen because the compost is decomposing and stealing the oxygen. You start rotting away, and you blame the soil because it didn't drain well. Well, that's what our experts have told you because they can't explain why the plant's rotting in the clay. Because back in the 60s, when we first moved here, my parents' soil was real bad clay. Nothing died because in those days, they didn't grow plants in compost. They planted azaleas, camellias, ferns, citrus in solid clay because that's what we had. Nothing died. They just started dying in the 80s when all the nurseries started growing plants in compost. And then you put that in clay and it just rots. And they tell, oh, the bad drainage or you watered too much. It didn't happen before that.
So it's still okay to water frequently with citrus. No, you don't have to dry it out. You don't need the soil to dry out.
No, the research we got was from citrus orchards. Water 3 times a day, every day, they're getting the best results. Citrus are not that rot prone. The most rot prone trees we sell, persimmons, avocado, cherries, but they're not rot prone if there's no compost in the ground. They're only rot prone if the soil conditions were done improperly. So they're more, well, just put it this way, they need more oxygen to be healthy on the root system.
Okay.
But in that orchard, same orchard, they have avocado trees there. So they're sitting in clay too. It's not killing them.
So mango, you could water that every day?
Yeah. I mean, mangoes come from a monsoonal climate, so they're used to being dry for half the year and wet for half the year. But water doesn't hurt anything. I mean, most plants would rather have rain every day than not have rain every day. I mean, that's, that water's just like for us. We need water every day. And if you have too much water, it's not a bad thing. It's not been a bad thing for plants at all. All the desert plants would like it to rain every day. But they're in compost, they can't take the water.
So if you change the water every day, is it like for just 5 minutes for fruit trees?
Okay.
How much?
So for plants, for production plants, so if you got a fruit tree, you got a production plant, you don't want it to stress it. And most plants have a root system in our soil in Orange County about 1 foot deep. So you want to keep that entire top foot of soil wet. And the only way you can tell that is not with the moisture meter. Moisture meters are too sensitive. The little electric moisture meters with that little rod on them, you put them in the soil until the soil is totally dry, it'll say it's wet. And when it says totally dry, your plant's dead. It's like, that's not, for a house plant, that's fine. There's no sun in your house, there's no wind in your house. That plant's not under any stress at all. You can let it go bone dry with one of those moisture meters and it's fine. But outside, you can't let the soil dry at all. So the top foot of the soil, you want to remain constantly moist while the plant's active. So these deciduous fruit trees, when there's no leaves on them, you don't have to keep them wet. Of course, it's usually the wintertime and it's wet anyway. All these evergreen plants, when they've got a crop on them, you've got to keep them on the wet side. And that means the top foot of soil. The only way to check that without buying a real expensive instrument to put in the ground is to get a stick about as thick as this, between pencil and finger thick. A piece of rebar is what farmers would walk around their fields with. Now most of them depend on computers to tell them when to water. But in the old days, they would walk around with a piece of rebar, and if they can push it in the ground about 1 foot deep to 1.5 foot deep, they're right on target. So moist soil, just like when you're working with clay in a kindergarten, if that clay is moist, you can push anything through it. Once it gets to a certain dryness, nothing can be pushed through that clay. Same thing with dirt in general. Wet sand, you can push things through it. Dry sand, you just cannot push anything through dry sand without a hammer on your hand or something. So if you can push in the ground about a foot to 1.5 feet deep at all times, if your tree's got active production going on, you're in good shape. So it depends, the sprinklers are all different. They put on water at different rates. You just have to use it enough to keep the soil moist this deep. If you let it get too dry on certain plants, like citrus, you let the soil dry out, they start taking water out of their fruit shrinks, and then you water it, and it restores the water in the fruit just blows open when it does that. So you have to keep the fruit on the fruit that split the easiest are navel oranges and pomegranates. If you let them get too dry, the next time you water it, they just split open because they expand too fast for the skin. So, yes, in the back.
How far out from the trunk of the tree?
They'll put the roots wherever you water them. So now what they like on most orchards now is to water at least 40% of the canopy area, at least 40%. I remember I had an orange tree in my yard that was about 10 by 10. It was fruiting fine. I had 3 drippers on it. This was back in the 80s before I knew enough stuff. So I had 3 drippers on it, which were watering areas around each dripper about like this. And when I dug that tree out because I wanted to plant an avocado instead, all the roots were in those 3 spaces. There were no roots anywhere else. The tree put its roots right where I was watering. So you can change your watering pattern, they said, when it's raining in the winter. But if you're watering here and suddenly you put a dripper over here in the summer, it won't find it. You have to put it right, make sure, well, they say you can do anything in the wintertime because the roots are going everywhere in the winter. And then they'll find this new spot and you start watering it by spring. But if suddenly, like one lady says, well, I water my citrus, I hose it on this side one week and then I hose it over there the next week. And I'm telling her, the tree doesn't have any roots there because you're not watering there. They're there where you water consistently. They're not suddenly there and then there and then there. They can't do that. So try to water in the same spot.
We have some patches of bark falling off our citrus tree. I'm just wondering, is there anything that we should put on there to cover it up?
Well, there's the disease. So this gentleman says, I don't have my mic, but he has bark peeling off a citrus. There is a disease called shell bark. And they said there's nothing you can do about it. It'll eventually kill the tree, but the tree might hang in there for another 10 years or so. But there is a disease called shell bark. You can look it up on the internet and see if there's any cures for that.
We have a lot of problems with rats coming up and eating our orchids. Is that something that you have encountered much? Or?
Well, rats and mice, supposedly you can kill with bubble gum. Not all of them will eat. Like when we tried this about 10 years ago because we had heard about it and we go, why would bubble gum kill rats and mice and gophers? Why would it work? But my daughter put out bubble gum on top of the block wall. This unwrapped it, put it on top of the block wall so our dog can reach it. 3 days later, I walk by, they can't digest it and they can't vomit it up and they starve to death in 3 days. That's the safest thing for birds of prey, because birds of prey can vomit anything that doesn't digest. So we promote that as a good way to kill rats and mice and gophers. I've never tried a gopher, but we certainly got rats and mice with it. Squirrels are impossible. You got to kill those things or trap them and drive them away. They're difficult to control. Birds you can scare easy. We have things that'll scare birds or bird netting.
So you don't use compost at all for tree?
Well, compost are dead plants. is a critical part of nature, but it doesn't belong in the dirt. So in the soil below the ground, it's just sand, silt, and clay, plus a few dead roots. So they say in nature, the amount of organic matter in the ground is less than 1%. It's 99% mineral, sand, silt, and clay. But also nature, there's 5 inches on average of dead leaves on top of the ground. And that's where the compost goes. So you have to have this. Plants want their dead leaves laying there because they recycle the nutrients in them. So it's critical to have that, but don't bury it. You bury it and you cause trouble. Now, farms have to bury the compost. The big farms on here, we see them spreading compost on the top of the ground. They have to bury it. They said if we don't bury it, it just blows to the next county. That's the problem with the big farms. But they know not to put more than that much on the ground. So I've seen them do it. The University of California has checked what farmers are doing, and they said the amount of compost, organic matter in the ground is at 1.1%, which is fine. It's not too much. But most of the planter mixes that you buy, they say make the 50-50, which is the killing point on like University of California says there are some lands in the Delta region of near Sacramento that are 40% organic because it's all this marshy area where the reeds have grown and been turned under. They said in those areas they can't grow any permanent crops, and the farmers on that land have to watch the watering really carefully because everything wants to rot in it. So that's the problem. Compost in the ground at a high dose makes everything rot because there's not enough oxygen for the roots to survive in it. Yes.
I have a citrus plant, and one of those plants planted like fairly close to a black walnut tree. Does the black walnut tree put out anything to stop fruiting? Any effect on?
The competition is water and sunlight. That's your main competition, is water and sunlight. Black walnuts supposedly can put out chemicals in their dead leaves that'll stop seeds from sprouting, and that's it.
Okay.
But water competition and sunlight is the main problems we're worried about. I asked the farmers, because a lot of farms, citrus orchards have these windbreak trees, 100-foot tall eucalyptus. And they said what they do is every 5 years, they run a trencher between the windbreak trees in the orchard to cut off all the eucalyptus roots, because the eucalyptus roots grow in there and steal the water. So big trees can really compete hard with the water in your garden. Anything close.
Another question. How does orchards prevent squirrels from eating their fruits? Because I'm having such a hard time with squirrels.
Well, they poison them or trap them. There are plenty of traps out there you can use. Plus, in big orchards, they also have owls, owl boxes. Owls control squirrels really well.
Owls?
So the problem with the owls is they want you to put their boxes 20 foot above the ground. So all your neighbors will see your owl box up there. But I've talked to farmers who use owl boxes. They said it's really helped with the squirrel problem and a lot of other rodents too. Rabbits, squirrels.
Is it good to put mulch over your fruit trees?
It's critical.
Okay, it is.
Yeah, if you don't put mulch on there, two things. Well, you don't get the nutrients, and the soil gets too hot, so your roots start burning up in the ground. So it's pretty critical to have the mulch on the top of the ground, and organic mulches are better.
Can the compost be the mulch?
Yes. Oh, yes. You just have to keep replenishing it as it goes. The other thing I want to mention too, so fruit trees require a lot of sun when the fruit's ripening. So the nice thing about the stone fruit family, peaches, apricots, nectarines, plums, is most of them ripen mid-year when the sun's at its highest. So on stone fruit in my yard, I wouldn't mind putting a lot of them on the north side of my house. which does two things. It gives them more chill in the winter because they're in the shade all winter. But they get the sun when the fruit's ripening. So you'll get better results on the north side than the south side, because the south side doubles up the heat in the winter because the sun's reflecting off the wall. So you save the south side for real sensitive plants like avocados, papayas, bananas, things like that. And the north side for stone fruit, so they're in the shade all winter getting their extra chill. And then they get sun when the fruit's ripe. There's not many stone fruit at all that don't ripen when the sun's at its highest. The plants that can tolerate the shade the best have been the ones where the fruit can hang on the longest. So I remember growing citrus on the north side of my house, and they still tasted okay. I was going, okay, this is pretty weird. But they hang on so long. You know, if a citrus isn't ripe, like if you're in Florida, navel orange in Florida ripens in November. Here it ripens in December or January, and on the north side it might ripen in April. But they'll hang on until July. In fact, my navel orange tree at my house still has oranges on it here in August. So you can grow those things in a lot of shade because they're on the north side. I've grown apples in just about total shade, and they still turn out okay. I've grown grapes in a lot of shade. In nature, they grow in trees, so it's not a big deal for a grape, and they hang on a long time. So grapes have been fine. I tried bananas in the shade, and they still grow bananas that taste fine, but instead of a cluster, like in full sun, you get a bunch of 120 bananas. In total shade, 8. So that's the disadvantage of bananas. So quite a few things can go in a lot of shade. Loquats is another one. Where'd my loquat go? Loquats are a common abandoned yard fruit tree in Orange County, and they ripen May, June into July. So also the sun's very high at that time. So I've grown these on the north side of my house also with good results. And according to the experts, loquat's one of the few crops in California that can be grown without irrigation because everything's centered around the wet season. So they bloom in late fall, early winter when the rains start up, and the fruits ripen by the end of spring when the ground's starting to dry out. So that's one crop that'll grow here without any man's help at all. Okay, so size of fruit trees. We said that some fruit trees don't get big. Most fruit trees want to keep them on the small side so they don't overproduce. So even in orchards now, they're telling the farmers grow smaller trees. Because in the old days, the trees were essentially 15 to 20 foot wide and high. Hard to pick those. You need ladders, and liability for falling off ladders is getting really nasty. So, plus the other problem is sunlight can only penetrate about 30 inches through the foliage. So your production area on this tree is this area. This is all no production there. You got lots of branching going on, but nothing else. So they said we're wasting our orchards with these big fruit trees. So now they're saying keep your fruit trees, if you can, about 7 foot high and about 5 foot wide. And this is called the spindle shape. That whole fruit tree will be productive. And what the orchards have to do is they have to plant like 6 or 9 times more fruit trees because they're smaller. But they'll get more production because the entire tree produces fruit. And that's a good size for homeowner's tree too, is if you can keep the tree 5 by 7, that's going to be between 50 and 100 fruit. per tree. And if it's a stone fruit, that's about as much as you want. It's somewhere in that range.
So my 30-year-old Fuji apple tree is over 15 feet. You know, do you trim those tall branches down now if there are no fruit on it, or do you wait until there's no leaves on it and when you normally trim it?
So we do most of the fruit tree pruning in the summer because there is no fruit on new growth.
Okay, for Fuji apple tree, you trim it in the summer?
Well, most fruit trees you trim in the summer when they're growing fast because there's no fruit on it. The fruit forms on older wood. The only ones that are not that way, fig trees, fruit as they grow, but you can still cut them. They'll just branch off and fruit again. Mulberries, they'll fruit on their new growth. If you keep trimming, of course, if you keep trimming, they'll keep making new growth and keep on fruiting. And jujube trees fruit on new growth too. But most fruit trees fruit on wood from where their leaves last year, they fruit this year. So they don't have any fruit on the new foliage at all.
So I can top the tree and now I don't have to wait.
Yeah, all summer long, we prune all summer long. So my pruning days at my house, my last house I lived at, where I had 120 fruit trees. July 4th, because I wasn't working that day. And then Labor Day, because I wasn't working that day either. I'll just do it those 2 days. In the wintertime, you do your detail work. But in the summertime, we're doing our size control. You don't want them to shade too much of the rest of your tree. And in general, most fruit trees don't grow past the first day of fall. Not all of them, but most of them don't. The tropicals, they don't seem to care. They'll grow all year round. But most of the deciduous fruit trees, first day of fall comes, they stop growing. And they'll develop then during the fall months, the flower buds on whatever you've left. So you finish your height control by fall. If you do your height control in winter, you're cutting off your best fruiting wood to do it. So you do your height control and size control in summertime, and then whatever you've left there for the fall, the plants sit there, absorb sunlight, and make their flower buds on what you've left. So
Is the size control also applied to citrus, this 5x7?
it does. I mean, citrus, yeah. That's one of the first, if you drive through the Central Valley, you'll see a lot of new orchards where the trees are real close together. And they're going to train them as hedges rather than as trees. So everybody's trying to automate everything. I mean, they've developed automatic pickers for strawberry fields, for apple orchards, for citrus. I mean, there aren't going to be as many farm workers soon. Because they've got all this stuff going now. We've seen the videos where they're picking fruit with picking machines, and they also have. So we saw this one where they use lasers to zap weeds. So now through the farm, instead of having to hoe them, they've got this tractor pulling this huge array of lasers. And they know where the crop's supposed to be. So whatever they pick up on camera that's not supposed to be there, the laser, it just burns it out.
Manual operator, it's all automatic.
It can be. I mean, the tractor is driven by a guy, but all that can be automatic now.
The choice of what to zap is automated.
Right. I mean, they have some machines that pull things by hand, and I would think that's a lot lower energy cost than a laser. Lasers are high energy cost. They show each unit for each laser has got to have a cooler on it and everything because there's so much energy in that. But they said the nice thing about that is you can operate at night. Even if you can't see the weeds, the machine can see them. And they'll just zap all the weeds without you being, and the machines can run with GPS now. So No one has to be out there. But yeah, the apple picking and all that's going to be done by machines. So, yes.
Going back to, I may have missed it, but going back to the banana trees and, my wife wants to, she's always asking to plant a banana tree, but I hear that they're very invasive and they can break apart, hardscape.
Well, that's if you ignore it for about 5 years or so. So bananas, you want to give them about a 10-foot. Well, they need 10 foot of overhead because the leaves are about 10 foot across. So they need that room, so they have to be wider than, say, these trees because these trees have smaller leaves. And then you have to give them I gave mine about 4 foot of ground space. I used to put flowering, hibiscus and things around my banana, but you want to give it about this much ground space so you can work with the trunks. So on a banana tree, you start off with one trunk that flowers and fruits. This one trunk will make up to 5 trunks at its base for the next generation. So generally, you don't want all 5 of those. If you let 5 babies form at one time with all those leaves, they're all competing for light, none of them will have any fruit. So generally, you pick between 1 and 3. I mean, on banana plantations, they just do 1. They just want 1 for 1. So any of these babies that comes up, and bananas, it's all water. This banana tree is all water. So if you took a shovel to the trunk and you can kick it through the trunk and cut the tree down that easily. They're that easy to cut down. So when the babies are coming up, you can just take off the ones you don't want. And what they do in a banana orchard is once this trunk gets to full height, which in an orchard, in the tropics, it takes 8 months. Here it takes 1 year for this trunk to reach full height. Then it blooms, and then it takes 8 more months for the fruit to ripen. So once it blooms, you allow 1 more trunk to start growing to take its place. By the time that fruit ripens, this trunk is ready to bloom. And then it takes its place. And then you choose the best baby off of that one in the right direction. If you ignore this for 5 years, you've got like 50 trunks growing, not much fruit. The ones on the outside can still get enough light to fruit, and it's just a big mess. But it is easy to clean up because it's all like celery. I mean, it's easy to cut through those things. But yeah, bananas do take a little more room than most of these fruit trees. So most of these fruit trees, if you keep them about 5 foot high, 5 foot wide, 7 foot high, which means you can space them about every 7 foot in your garden. Yes.
So you didn't answer if you're gonna water more frequently, 5 to 7 times a week. How many minutes do you think I have bubbles on my fruit tree
You'll have to see how long it takes to keep the ground wet a foot deep.
to keep it?
Because every sprinkler system is different. Every soil is different. The amount of penetration you get. If you have sandy soil, you'd probably want to keep it wet 1.5 foot deep. If you have clay,
Can you put one of those bamboo sticks in there and then pull it up a foot and just see if it's wet, or does that not really?
well, it won't go in if it's dry. So
No, I mean, leave it in there always and then just go over.
if it's dry, you couldn't even pull it out. I mean, it's so easy. Just go out there with just get the thinnest rebar you can find, which is 3/8 inch rebar. They sell 4 foot pieces with an N and L shape. Just walk around with that and see if you can push in about 1 foot to 1.5 foot. And then you're on target. Okay, let's see. So the things you put on walls or can put on walls, the grapes, the passion vine, dragon fruit clings to almost any surface you put it on. So that can go on a wall if you don't have that much room. Again, we talked about the ones that don't need as much sun. The ones that need the most heat, probably papaya trees. We're growing papayas. I don't know if the crop will be great in the next week or so. Might be okay. Papayas, there are certain areas in Orange County that just don't get cold in winter that they do really well. like certain areas in Costa Mesa just don't get that cold. About 20 years ago, I was driving from my mother's house in Mission Vale in December, right around Christmas. It was 42 at her house. Drove to Costa Mesa to a restaurant. It was 57. Going 57 is tropical weather at night. 42 is winter. Papayas hate the 40s. They love the high 50s. So, and then a friend of mine lives on a south-facing slope above Tustin. He's had papayas there for decades. That area on the hillside facing south is just warm. It doesn't get that cold in the winter. Yes.
You know, I'm from Northern California, near the peninsula, near Menlo Park. So I try to grow a star fruit up north in Savine. It cannot take cold?
So I grew star fruit in the 1980s and 90s when we hit 23 degrees. They made it, but where they made it was underneath the south eaves of my house. So I had a one-story house. Eaves came out 5 feet. Star fruit south facing, right underneath the eaves. Anything that grew beyond the eave froze in that winter. But below the eave next to my house, the star fruit did wonderful. So those were the years we had frosts. Now that same year we hit 23 degrees in Lake Forest. In Menlo Park, it'd probably been about 18. So you would probably still lost. But that's the coldest. San Francisco was 18 degrees that winter. Sacramento, I think, was 13. It was nasty. That is nasty cold. So
Can you grow papaya in a 15-gallon pot?
I've done it.
And so then you can move it out if it's got cold?
Well, the problem with containers is that, you can move it. So I remember driving through a neighborhood, I see this guy in the wintertime, papaya in a 15-gallon container. He's moving from his yard into his garage.
Yeah.
And one of my friends would put his in his kitchen. He's been divorced twice now. But it works. Containers, the nice thing about containers, the thing about containers, is they're hotter than the ground in the summer and they're colder than the ground in the winter. So you can't leave things in pots outside in the winter if it's cold sensitive, because the pot gets colder than the ground. So the ground is warmer, in the winter and cooler in the summer than pots are. So that's one thing you have to be careful with. So certain things we don't like to grow in pots. Cherries hate hot temperatures. Citrus don't mind it at all. Dragon fruit certainly doesn't care. Apples don't particularly like containers in the summer either. So certain plants look cooked in the summer in pots.
So it would be better to put the papaya in the ground.
Yeah, or if you put in a pot, you got to move it indoors at night.
And I just bought last week a 5-gallon Mexican papaya, only this big, and I'm trying to decide where we're going to put this thing in. It would be easier to leave it in a 15-gallon pot.
What city are you in again?
In Lake Forest.
Yeah.
Just got that.
And if you live on a hill, you may be okay if you live in a low spot. Now, we haven't been that cold the last 3 or 4 years, so you may hit a good streak.
So do they die? What happens if it's too cold?
Their roots rot and they fall over.
Can you cover it?
Yeah. Yeah, you can certainly create a little greenhouse, just put sticks around it and put plastic over it. That's fine. Keep that area warm. A lot of nurseries, they said they don't have to cover the top. They just have to put plastic on the sides to keep the ground warmer. So, yes.
Rose apple trees in containers.
They're fine. We don't seem to have any problems. Did I bring mine in? I left it outside. And my daughter's rose apples at her house this year. In fact, she might still have one there. Were that big.
Fruit.
Yeah.
That Anna,
Pardon?
that Anna.
No, rose. It's a rose apple. Rose apples look like kind of like guavas,
Oh, yeah.
but they taste like rose perfume. You eat one, you go, okay, that was good. And you eat the second one, you go, okay, this is too much perfume. It's crazy. It's kind of a neat fruit. It looks like a eucalyptus tree that makes big yellowish. Hers are almost red, but yellowish fruit that are hollow, thick rind, real tasty. For a few anyway. Now, I will mention there's one tree in our yard that was ever bearing. So this is Suriname cherry. It's related to rose apples and guavas. We had it one by our mailbox, and you can walk up to it any day. It bloomed every day of the year. We kept it about, trunk like this to be higher than the mailbox. And then a head like this, we just kept it trimmed. And it fruited year round. So it was always blooming. The fruit gets about that big. They look like little pumpkins. And when they're developing, they're green first, then they turn yellow, and then they turn orange, and they turn red. And this one was ripe when it was purple. So looked like this little tree with all these little ornaments on it. And you go up to that tree any day of the year and pick fruit. That's the only fruit tree I've seen that was totally everbearing like that.
Tolerate south-facing sunlight.
This was on our driveway above our mailbox. So, between two driveways. So it's all concrete all around it, can take the heat. Most of the Suriname cherries are heaviest producing in spring and fall, but we've seen a number of them that don't stop. They can produce year round, especially if they're in the ground. Maybe not in a pot as well, but in the ground they can fruit all year, and they have a seed like a cherry. They do taste like a tangerine. Although some people don't like them. My wife didn't like them. My dad thought they tasted like medicine. But my daughter, myself, just kept eating them. So, yes.
So you said it was in a space between the two driveways?
We had one of those cul-de-sac lots. So all the driveways, my neighbors and my driveway kind of met. And then the tree was right in that little V, right between the two concrete things. My mailbox was right there too.
How do you keep it? You just kept it small or big?
They don't get that big. I mean, they can grow with time, but I just took my pruners out there and kept it around, because in our backyard, we had some that were 15 foot tall with the trunk about that thick. But this one by the mailbox, it was all crowded in there. My rose garden was in the same area, so it was kind of crowded, but a nice looking little plant and very ornamental. They do get bark that looks like a guava bark, which is that marble-like bark. So there's a lot of nice things about them. A little slow for us to grow them. Like, we've been growing this thing for almost 3 years now from seed. It should start fruiting next year. If you were to buy it and plant in the ground, it should start fruiting next year. Now, mine was trained as a single trunk, but it came up that way. Just a bird planted it and just grew up as a single trunk. This one, we shaped it more like a bush. But and you never know. I mean, a friend of mine, first Suriname cherries I ever bought from a friend down in Vista, fruit was tart. But we grow most of ours from the seeds from very sweet ones. We expect all its offspring. So far, most of its offspring have also been very sweet. So, yes.
Really big, but it only fruits once a year.
Try watering a lot in the fall and see if you'll get a second crop on it.
Do they like water?
All plants like water.
Speaking of water, if the water table is a little bit higher, we're in the Bolsa Chica area by the wetlands, and the water table is a little higher. We're actually planting in pots, our fruit trees. We're using Gary's pot.
Yeah, so
And so I guess the question I have is, they're about 35-gallon pots, and they're, we're watering them, going to be watering them, and they're all fruit trees. So I guess my question is, the size of the pots versus putting them in the ground. Is there a certain size that would be better?
Well, in general, pot size, the bigger the pot, the longer the tree will live. Because root bound is more of a problem in a container than it is in the ground. So, in a pot, figure 10 years on average you'll get, which is not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad was a bonsai artist, and bonsai, they want plants, the same pot indefinitely. And the rules on that, some plants they'd repot them every 2 years, but most of them at least once every decade. They pull the whole thing out of the pot, trim off half the soil and the roots, because generally there's all this roots and dead roots in there after 10 years. You got to get rid of a lot of that and give them some virgin soil to grow into that doesn't have rotting roots in it. So they would replace the soil, put it back in the same pot, trim the top about half so there's no shock at the same time. And in Europe, we've seen the plans where they had wooden boxes made for fruit trees so they can put them in and out of the greenhouses, but they can unbolt the box and remove the soil on one side and put new soil in there, and they can do that to keep the plant going. I mean, in Japan with these clay pots that they use, they showed where they have some large bonsai, they actually have a crane that lifts the plant out of the pot, because the plant's, like a couple 100 pounds, so they can work on it, and then they drop it right back into the same pot with fresh soil. So they have that technique down pat, where they can replenish the soil. But for most of these fruit trees, it's not, unless it's something really slow growing, it's not worth trying to keep it going. Just buy a new one and get it. Like I had a citrus and only a pot that was maybe 10 gallons total, but was an urn, so I couldn't get it out and do anything. Mm-hmm. It finally totally gave up at 15, but first 10 years were fine. It was making a decent amount of fruit on it for 10 years, and then it went downhill after that. But we do have a white sapote tree in a 24-inch plastic pot out here that I planted over 20 years, almost 30 years ago. It still looks good in fruits. Maybe it's big enough. Well, it's a dwarf white sapote, Subel white sapote. So we don't think it needs the entire root space. So it may have some extra dirt to play with for all this time, almost 30 years in the same pot. So.
I had bought my grandmother one of those multi-fruit trees. It kept it hot for a while. And when she moved in with us, I brought it in after about 10 years and put it in the ground, and it turned into a grapefruit tree, and it's very prolific. It's just almost constant grapefruit all the time, but it's about 10 feet tall now.
Yeah, most of those multi-grafted fruit trees lose the grafts within 10 years, they say, because one of the plants in that collection will be a bolete, and it'll just take over the rest of them.
So I guess I have a next question for that. So if you have a tree in a pot and it's ending its life expectancy, can you give it a new life by putting it in the ground?
Yes, new root space.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Some plants also tolerate. So among fruit trees, the plant that tolerates the most damage and can recover are apples, and followed by pears. So they not only need the least amount of oxygen in the soil to survive, but they're also real good at repairing wounds. So you can hack an apple tree to a stump and let it regrow over and over and over, and it doesn't kill it. They repair their wounds better than any other plant known. I mean, we're talking all plants. They said apples and pears repair their wounds really well. So apple orchards can go for 150 years or so and be productive. The worst repairing fruit tree, peaches and other stone fruit. So peach orchards nowadays, they say 13 years is it.
And then rip it up and put it in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, they'll go for 20, but they're declining at 10. And once you get past 10, they're declining. So for an orchard, they found out statistically it's not worth keeping them going after 13 because, you know, from that point on, returns are going down. So you know, even though in your home it may be worth it because you don't eat that many peaches, but for a farmer, they want to be at max production. And after 13 years, they said their production's getting too bad to keep going.
Same goes for plums too.
Plums are not as short-lived as peaches. Usually they can get up to 30 years. But most fruit trees are grafted. A lot of grafted plants fail by the time they're 50. Even the ones that are supposed to live a long time, if they're grafted, often the grafts don't work after 50.
Do you have any opinion as to like when you prune your stone fruit, like peach tree, you know, open vase or the straight form?
So open vase was the old style developed in the 1940s and 50s. Nowadays, it's spindle shape. Now with peaches, they might make an exception because if you form a peach or nectarine to a spindle, that single trunk is often too vigorous. They can't get the fruiting very well on it. It wants just to grow. So they allow it to have 3 or 4 trunks, but still more upright, not so spread out. So the open vase is not used by modern orchards, but see what what was happening in the old days is that fruit trees, when all the branches are growing, when they're young, the branches grow straight up. And when they're growing straight up, only the tips get enough sunlight to fruit. And in nature, what happens is when the tree gets older and the branches get so long, it naturally does this. So they thought, okay, we'll just create this shape at the beginning. Well, it turns out this shape isn't the most efficient because if the sun's coming from the south this way, this whole side doesn't get any sunlight compared to this side. So they started working with half the vase and they said, nah, that doesn't make any sense. Just work with a more shape like this so this whole plant can get sunlight on it and keep it small so the sunlight goes through it. And that's more efficient than an open vase. So
We have a Eureka lemon that's in maybe a 30-gallon pot, and I was hoping to plant it in our front yard. But it has a lot of compost in there. I actually put the compost in there, and I'm wondering, would you just start over and get a whole new tree, or would you just try to pull it out by its trunk and get some of the compost out?
citrus are very tolerant of work on them. So they're very tolerant. They can take it. So when we used to get citrus here in the 1990s, when we found out that all these citrus sold to us in compost was terrible, we went to an orchard supplier in the Central Valley that grows them in the dirt. So they grow them in the ground there. And then when they get ready to send them to us, here's these trees with trunks this big. So you know that the tree must have been this wide and maybe 10 foot tall. They just cut the top off. Sometimes there'd be leaves on the side of the stem. And then they sent us a root ball that was 8 inches across and about a little over a foot deep. And that's it. They just send that to us. And that's how they used to grow citrus for all the orchards. They grew them in the ground, and when they were ready to sell them, they would just dig them out of the ground, wrap the ball in burlap, called balled and burlapped, or B&B, and you'd have this tree that most of the top was hacked off. And then we put them in a pot at our nursery, surround them with our top pot, and within 2 weeks, they'd be growing again. So you can, if the tree's healthy, so they used to harvest their trees between February and November. We can go up there anytime between February and November, and they'd load up our trees with these trees that are just pulled out of the ground. We'd lose maybe 1 out of 20 because they didn't get the root ball when they dug it up. But for the most part, those trees with that thick a trunk, boy, they grew really fast. So you do have to, if you think you're messing up the roots too badly. Now, when we couldn't do that anymore, when they started doing the quarantining in Southern California, The nursery up north in the Central Valley said, there's too much paperwork now. We're not going to be able to supply you anymore. So for a few years, we bought the trees from the people who grew them in compost, and we would just knock all the compost off, put them back in the pot with our top pot, put them in half a day of shade for 2 weeks, and then sell them. So it takes a few weeks. They said it takes 2 weeks when you work with the roots for the roots to become where they start operating normally again. So for a couple of weeks, you don't want to put them in total shade because they don't have any energy there. So we just figured half a day of sun, and they were fine. We didn't lose a single city. We're doing hundreds of those, probably close to 1,000 a year. We were just bare rooting them and putting our top pot on them. Once you get our top pot on them, they stop turning yellow. You can water them as much as you want. Nothing happened. They grow a lot faster. So we were happy with that method for a few years, and then we got put into quarantine. So.
When is the quarantine going to be over? You have an idea?
Probably another 20 years. I mean, it's so bad around the world. This disease is a lot nastier than a lot of people think. So Florida, starting in 1940, produced way more citrus than California did. But in 2020, they dropped below California. And they said right now, citrus in Florida is 1/5 of what it was 20 years ago. That's how much damage has been done by this disease. So far, they haven't found a disease tree in California yet, but it's all around us. So they're trying their heck to keep it out of the orchards. Because Florida just, wherever it's hitting and around the world, it's just messing up the trees. Now, they're real close to having a cure that they can spray on the citrus that'll make them tolerate the disease quite well. That's one way. And they're trialing that in Florida. Texas has developed a whole line of GMO citrus that have spinach genes in them, makes them immune to the disease. But Florida right now is working on gene-edited citrus, which is different. So GMO, you put foreign genes in the tree, so most people won't like that. Gene editing, they're snipping out the portions of the gene that make them susceptible to this disease.
CRISPR it out.
Right. And they said they've got a whole line now in Florida being trialed right at this moment to take the place of all the trees that are being killed by this disease. They're trialing them out. They have to make sure they taste fine, that they can be grown the same way as the other citrus can be. So they're trialing those at the moment. So they're, once they have the line of trees ready to go, it'll probably take them 20 years to get in production. That's the problem. But they're working on it from some interesting angles now. So
Propagation from seed to citrus.
well, it's illegal for nurseries to propagate from seed
Oh, it is?
because seeds can carry the disease too.
Seeds will carry disease.
It can. It doesn't have to, but it can.
Can you tell by the fruit whether it has it before you
You can't tell for a number of years if it has the disease. I mean, you can check it. You can just pull the leaves off and check it. So all the citrus grown in California for the last 20, 30 years, everything has to come out of University of California's collection. So they have a collection of citrus underneath the screen building so that no bugs or disease can get in there. And if a nursery wants to grow a citrus tree, they have to buy the rootstock from University of California, and they have to buy the budwood from the University of California so that they know it's disease free. If I grow a citrus from a seed and sell it, we can get fined. A nursery got fined 30 years ago for bringing a citrus in illegally to California. They got fined $170,000. Put them out of business pretty much.
So is this disease prevalent in China? It came from China, right?
Came from China.
So I haven't heard of anything how it affected the crops in China. Did they just not publish it?
Well, China's a big country, so the disease comes from a certain area probably. But in the United States, they grow citrus in Arizona. So far in the citrus orchards of Arizona, disease hasn't found it yet because it's so isolated. It's got deserts all around it. They just got 2 weeks ago. They just had the first case of that disease in Arizona coming in from Mexico. But they said that that's separated by the rest of Arizona's citrus orchards by about 100 miles of desert, so they don't expect it to spread from that point. But right at the southern border of Arizona, they finally found a diseased citrus there. So Arizona is pretty safe. So parts of China where they grow citrus, they're probably isolated, so that China's a big country, just as big as the U.S. So it has areas like that are isolated. But yeah, that disease came all around the world from China originally, and it's going.
When did it get here?
Pardon?
When was it discovered that it got to the U.S.? 5 years ago?
Hit Florida right around 2000, and went from Florida through the Caribbean, through Mexico, into California. Actually, in California, it came from Hawaii. So you're not supposed to bring citrus in from any other part of the world, even Arizona into California. You're not supposed to do it, but some people smuggle things in. So these people in San Gabriel Valley had their friend from Hawaii bring in a certain tree that they can't find here because it's diseased. So they grafted trees in San Gabriel area, Yorba Linda area, that area, and I think in Orange County with pieces of that tree that have the HLB disease. When they first did that, they didn't think it was going to be a problem when they found it because the bugs that spread the disease weren't here. But the bugs were in Florida and they made it through the Caribbean, through Mexico into California from Mexico. So now they have the disease and the bugs that spread the disease that can wipe out citrus. We're not as tropical as Florida, so it's not spreading nearly as fast as it did in Florida, but it's still not under control. So
at the beginning of the summer, at my Green Thumb nursery in Laguna Hills, they went in, the ag department came in and they chopped up all of their citrus. So they can no longer sell it. So I live so close. Does that mean that at any time, in a year now, next year, whatever, that I probably have 5 citrus trees? Is it that?
That means that at any moment, the ag department can come and take all your trees too. So the ag department is constantly monitoring for this disease, so they know where the disease is moving. So apparently it was within 5 miles of Green Thumb. That's why they, here they hit the nurseries up the road. This is in 2017. Nursery up the road got hit. Next nursery got hit, and then we were quarantined. By that time, we had totally sold out all but 3 citrus. So they only cut down 3 of ours, but up the street they had 200. So it's like, boy, that was nasty. But if they detect the disease in your neighborhood, they'll be putting traps. They can trap the bug that spreads the disease and test the bug for that disease. And if it's got the disease, then they'll check your trees, pull off leaves and test them at a lab to see if they have it. You cannot tell your tree has disease for a number of years after it catches it, but they can check it in a lab. In fact, they said they were training dogs to smell it out.
I thought the fruit doesn't fully stays half stable.
Well, that's on a tree that's with the disease that's quite established on it.
Oh.
So in Florida, they don't pull out the trees anymore because they just assume that all the trees have it. So they see that where they have fruit that's half green and half orange.
Right.
But we never see it here. All the trees are removed before those symptoms show up. So
I take it there's no remedies you can take, preventive remedies, the way it is right now.
well, you can build a structure over your tree.
That's about it, right?
So one nursery in Orange County has done that, so they can sell citrus. That's mimosa. They have a real fine screen that fruit flies can't get through or anything can get through it. And they have to have a positive pressure door, so big fans behind their door to push all the air out when you open the door. And they're allowed to sell citrus because of it. Now they just last week allowed big box stores to sell citrus because they said if they're 30 foot from the nearest store, they'll allow them to.
Wow.
How did it affect Northern California as opposed to Southern California?
It hasn't reached there yet. No one brought. Well, they haven't found anything. Let's put it that way. But it's not going to travel as fast because it's not as tropical in that area. So, because there's other plants that the disease can hitchhike on, that's found throughout Florida. All these tropical things related to citrus just hitchhikes from plant to plant to plant. So a lot of popular ornamental plants and then Florida carried the disease too. And they said florists had a lot to do with it. Florists were selling pieces of these flowers that were related to citrus that were carrying the disease and the bugs. In California, what they did is they outlawed all those plants that are related to citrus that can carry the disease before the disease got real bad here. So, any other questions on fruit trees? We went sideways on the citrus there a lot, but yes.
What about those multi-grafted fruit trees and, trying to exfoliate it for space?
Well, that's not bad, but since you can keep fruit trees really small, that's not much different than espaliating them.
So we have like the terrace on our hill, that's like 3 feet. So I can just prune it and keep it within that boundary.
Yeah, Dave Olson Nursery, who does a lot of this research, they're the company that supplies all these trees for us. They've done a lot of research where they said any fruit tree will produce at 4 foot in height, 3 foot in width. So they have, on their website, you can find pictures of homeowners who just line up trees like a hedge and just shear them to that size all summer long. And they'll get fruit. It may not be the best quality fruit, but they'll get fruit. I tried that, and on citrus, I had a citrus hedge every 3 foot. I find 3 foot a little close because they want to do that a little too much. Maybe 4 foot might be a lot easier, but you can still do them pretty close.
It's like 7 foot or so.
Well, 7 foot would be this size. 5 foot.
Maybe 3 foot to the front and back. And then 7
Yeah,
foot.
yeah. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
And we do have multi-grafted apple trees that are espalier shaped, but they're so short. When we get them in, there's a nursery in Oregon that does this stuff, and they graft them like this, but they're only 3 foot tall. And this is only 1 foot off the ground. I don't, that's meant to go in a pot somewhere on a raised planter. It's too short for the ground. We had another nursery that was doing them 5 foot. And that was better, but they went out of business doing them at 5 foot. So, but 3 foot's, yeah, that's really short for espalier. So, these trees, apple trees are probably the best fruit tree to espalier, followed by pears, because on apples, the same branch can flower and fruit for 10 years easily or more. Yeah, so peaches, you wouldn't be able to do that with peaches. The entire branch, you got to get rid of it every year because they'll never fruit on that same branch again. That's the problem with the peach tree. So you'd have to retrain your espalier every year. But apples, pears, citrus, you can really trim them heavy. As long as there's still leaves on the branch, they'll still flower the next year in fruit. So.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any time that you can no longer transplant the citrus from the ground?
Well, they don't like it cold, but we haven't gotten cold at all in the last 3 or 4 years. So you can do it anytime.
Okay. What about codling worms on the apples? How do you treat it?
Okay, so on apples, the codling moth has to hide its eggs. So in my house, the only thing we had to do was make sure the apples weren't touching another apple. So when an apple touches another apple, that's a good hiding spot for the codling moth to put its eggs. And then you get holes in both apples right where they touch. If the apple's hanging singly, it doesn't get any worms. So you thin them out when the apples are about as big as when they're smaller than a golf ball, bigger than your thumbnail, you start thinning them out so that they're hanging singly without touching anything. If they touch a branch, that's still a potential hiding spot. Now there's sprays that'll work too, but you got to spray them every 2 weeks to keep the codling moth off, or just make sure they're not touching another apple. Now, we've had a few apples that they still get worms even if they're not touching. Mutsu was one, Jonagold was another, but almost every other apple I've grown, and I've grown quite a few apples, they get no worms if they weren't touching anything.
Okay.
Pears, same thing. If the pear touches another pear, you get worms in both. So they get the same worm. So the other way to do it is you just get a number 2 paper bag from Smart and Final and wrap the apple in it.
Can you wrap the whole bunch?
No, just the one apple in the bag.
Okay.
Yeah, University of California did that for organic farmers back in the 80s. They said, take an X-Acto knife, we had those in those days, make a slit in the bottom of the bag, slip the small fruit through that hole, and roll up the other end of the bag, and the apple will develop in there. The codling moth won't see it, won't lay eggs on it. Birds won't see it, won't lay eggs in it. And then Sunset Magazine said in the 1990s, Ziploc bag works better. You get more sun on it, it gets more color. They said make a little hole on one end of the bag, so let some moisture out. But they said Ziploc worked better than paper. So.
So you mentioned talking about persimmon earlier. We have our foliage is alternate bearing. So you get too much one year and nothing the next year. Have any solutions for that?
We saw articles about that. So the Bathgate farm in San Juan Capistrano used to do a lot of persimmon research. They said the year they got no fruit, in the winter they would prune the branches back about 2/3 because that whole branch would fruit the next year too much. And if they had a heavy crop, they wouldn't touch it. But if they had no crop or a very light crop, they would prune the heck out of it in the winter. So all that growth that grew, they'd take most of it off.
Can you tell us about pineapple guava?
Yeah, pineapple guavas are not close related to true guavas, but they're distant relatives. We do recommend, unless you buy a self-fertile grafted variety, and there are some self-fertile grafted varieties out there like Coolidge and Naismiths, just plant 2 plants because most nurseries grow these from seed. And if you have 2 different seedlings, they'll pollinate each other. This will bloom next year with the red and white flowers that are quite attractive, and the fruit ripens in the fall. And most of the fruit that we get off of seedlings is pretty good. I remember walking on a slope where they had used these as greenbelt bushes. I was picking fruit off the ground, and all of them were quite good. I was amazed, even though these were just seedling grown plants on this hillside. My dad's house, he had planted 3. One wasn't very good. The 2 other ones were okay. One was quite good, in fact. So you get 2 different pineapple guavas, and they'll cross-pollinate themselves in fruit.
Do you sell a self-fruit variety?
No, the only grower who does the grafting on those, Laverne Nursery, which was bought out recently by Averde, their main thing was citrus. And once we stopped getting citrus from them, we stopped buying those from them too. But I'm not sure what the status is anymore because they were bought out by another company. So yes.
We have a relation guava. It's very tall. Can I top that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to cut mine down in the winter to about 5 feet,
Oh.
and then most of the new growth would still fruit.
Oh, I see.
So
In the winter
yeah, I'd cut mine down.
after fruit. Yes.
So my 3-year-old Fuji, it's about 8 feet tall and kind of spindly, but bigger than this one. 10 apples on it. So should I go ahead, if I don't want to continue to get should I go ahead and top all the ones that you can do that? Okay.
Yeah, and try
you
to.
want it to have what kind of a shape for a Fuji?
So you want it to be about this form, but you want the branches to do this.
Oh,
So apples tend to do this.
right.
and then you don't get any fruit because only the tops of the branches getting the sunlight, and if you cut them off, then you've lost your entire crop. So you got to get the branches horizontal as you can. They don't have to be perfect, but mostly horizontal. When they're forced to go horizontal, they stop growing. So a lot of plants, when the branch is vertical, they keep growing. When you lay them down to the side, they stop growing. Then what happens is they start making all these short branches along here that make apples. And if that branches start growing too far, just keep clipping. Don't cut them off. Clip them short, and the leaves at the top of that short branch will then make flowers and fruit for next year.
So do you need to put, what do you call it?
Well, sticks, wires, whatever you need to do to get the branches to be that way. Grow like a Christmas tree.
And so they're just growing in two directions, this way, or they're growing.
They can grow in all directions, but it's got to be like a Christmas tree.
Can you put ornaments on them like a tree has?
Weigh them down, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you keep it to 7 feet or so. Okay.
Yeah, so, with stone fruit, most stone fruit, like plums, the pleuries, apricots, cherries, they'll try to make a fan shape. Just a nice fan. Peaches requires a lot more work because they fruit best on horizontal branches too, but you want more than one. Usually you want several trunks and then everything else being horizontal off a peach. And nectarine. Pears you train like apples. Figs, what figs are usually done is they're cut almost to the ground every winter, leaving a few inches of current growth, and then they do this, make figs to the top, and the next winter you cut them down to within the 2 inches where they started, and then they'll make another branch off of that has figs all the way to the top. So that's how figs are normally grown, once a year, pruning it in late winter, and then they'll just start over again. Mulberry's almost that severe. You can do mulberry because whatever grows off of a little bit of the previous growth on a mulberry will then have fruit on it too. Our favorite tree to sell now is avocado. In fact, we sell more avocados than any other fruit tree. Like next year, I've ordered among these trees here, which will get bare root in January, about 1,200. Avocados, I've ordered 2,000. We sell that many avocados. The nice thing about avocados is there's no sugar in the fruit. Although we think some varieties have sugar in them, but generally there's no sugar in there, so you won't get a sugar overload when you eat an avocado. Because the problem we're having problem with fruit trees in general is they're making everything sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. And you see what's done to people in the United States. We're overloaded with carbs.
Is your avocado tree, I came down last month and bought one of those. It's called Nabal. Start with a Nabal? Yeah.
Nabal, yeah.
Yeah. Is that a popular avocado brand?
Not that popularly planted. It's really good. It's the mother of Reed. So Reed is probably our most popular avocado we sell is Reed because they're really, really good and really, really productive. Nabal is its mother. And the book says Reed is better than Nabal, but we eat Nabal now and then. It's hard to say that's not better than Reed. It's good.
Reed or
Nabal.
So I bought my Reed here like 5 years ago, and that thing, I wanted a thick trunk. It's not that, and it's going all over, and that they're so heavy. So do you try to stake all the branches because they want shade as well because they get burned? I have no idea I've tried trimming it. They just go all over these branches. and I don't know do you stake all of, oh, you do.
If you want to Reed's supposed to be a narrow upright tree.
A narrow.
But they sometimes have trouble finding their way up.
Yeah.
Because at my last house I lived at, my reed did a spiral before it went up. And I've seen that at a customer's house. I went to a customer's house. Their reed tree was 20 years old. It was about 20 foot high. It was only 8 foot wide, but the trunk did a spiral. It took a while to find what was up. But yeah, if you stake it, that'll help. Just choose any branch that you can stake well and put that straight up, and then that'll continue to
No,
go.
I do, I have a big stake in it, but the branches are so spindly and they just wanna hang all
Yeah.
over the ground and.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't look like an avocado.
Yeah, in my first house, the first reed I planted looked like a Christmas tree. It just went straight up. But my second house, yeah, it went all over the place.
I mean, it could grow on the ground if I didn't, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
everywhere. Wow.
Yes.
I really like lychee tree, but I don't want the big size of it. You know, can you grow that in a pot?
Yeah, I've done it.
Oh,
So if you get a good lychee tree, so we got a lychee tree that was air layered by my friend. We put it right in the top pot. So when I got it, it was this big. 2 years later, it was this big. And on its 4th year I had it, it had a good crop, over 100 lychees. We were really happy with it. It was this in a 20-inch box, not a 24, 20-inch box with our top pot. And it was at April 4 years ago, where it was 90 degrees, 80 degrees in February and 100 degrees in April. They like that heat. So it was blooming and it made well over 100 fruit. I couldn't believe how lucky we were at that point to have that tree. You know, it's only, about this tall total, and about this wide, fruiting that heavily. I had never seen that before, but in our top pot, they do quite well. My daughter has a tree at her house now, so hopefully she can propagate off of that one pretty soon.
So I have a lychee tree too in LA Chinatown. It's grown so tall. It's like 20
Yeah.
feet tall. And we don't get any of the fruits because the peacocks would come and eat all the fruits. So is it too late to prune it down? I mean, it's like,
I don't know lychees, how sensitive they are.
okay.
I would imagine, since they live a long time, that they can tolerate the pruning, but I don't
Right
know.
now, the fruits, they don't belong to us anymore. We have these crazy peacocks that look very nice, and they come and eat all of our lychees.
what variety?
It's Bengal.
Oh, what about sweethearts?
Have not grown that one. I mean, that's all we can, well, there's a famous Bengal tree in a house near Saddleback College down in Mission Viejo. And that person there air layers a lot, and he gives it to friends. And my friend went over to his place and went ahead and did some air layering off his tree too. But he's got like 3 in his front yard, courtyard. I guess he had to build walls around so people wouldn't steal all the fruit. And you see the 3 trees behind his wall. They're only about 8 or 10 foot tall, and they're always loaded in the summer. So, yeah, there's certain trees we know of. There's another tree in Missionville, North Missionville, that has a lychee tree that gets fruit every year. But that's all I knew in Missionville that got fruit. Because I had tried to grow them from trees we bought from other nurseries, and they kept dying. But it's just the quality of the soil that was just killing the trees. So soil has, success with these trees has a lot to do with the soil. Okay, thank you.